You talk about this. What is the Safety Act? This is what the Safety Act is. It means safety, accountability, fairness, and equity today. Not tomorrow or yesterday. Today. All right? That's what it is. Safety. Second question. When and how was it passed? Well, you know what? There's something called the lame duck session. It's the remaining days of the General Assembly. It happens after the first of the year before the General Assembly gets sworn in. That's when the vote threshold drops from a supermajority to a majority. And that's when chaos generally occurs during the lame duck session. There was a lot of discussion in the 101st General Assembly about police training because of the Floyd incident and that horrible situation in Minneapolis. So the discussion went around how are we going to have police held to higher standards for purposes of licensing training. Okay. Some people say that I'm going to have to open up the jail cells. Well, the 90-day clock is going to start on January 1st for people who are going to be detained.
The fact that I'm the chair of the Heroin Opioid Prevention and Education Task Force, and this is something that's very important to me personally, not just in terms of what I've sunk my teeth into policy-wise at the county, but as an individual who lives in DuPage, just like many of you, I'm sure all of us can point to someone 1 degree of separation or closer that's been personally impacted by substance use and addiction. It touches all of us. I have a first cousin who struggled with opioid addictions. Didn't struggle, continues to struggle, because addiction's a disease, you never let it shake you. This law not only lessens, frankly, the ability for us to retain people that are awaiting trial for drug-induced homicide, people that have actually killed someone because of them dealing fentanyl. But in addition to this piece of legislation, as Rich mentioned, there's another bill, House Bill 3447, that was sponsored by my opponent, Deb Conroy, that is actually going to reduce possession of 3 grams of fentanyl to a misdemeanor. For context, 3 grams of fentanyl can kill every single person in this room. It can kill 1,500 people. Again, not Republican policy, not Democratic policy, extreme policy. And I'm telling you, every increase that we've seen in terms of overdoses in DuPage County, for the most part, has been driven by the impact of fentanyl. How many of you saw the recent report about rainbow fentanyl that's circulating? This is killing our kids. This is killing 1,000 people daily in the United States of America. And the last thing that we need is to lessen sentencing for people that are dealing this toxin that's killing people. And I can guarantee you that as representatives of DuPage County, in my capacity as county board chairman, there is nothing more that we will fight for than stopping these pieces of legislation from being implemented.
The problem is, with no cash bail, the alternative is I have to build an extra big courthouse. I have to staff it now on every weekend and holiday, which is like over 110 more days of all overtime. That's going to be taxpayer burden. Can't even hold a person on Christmas. There'll have to be, full bond court every single day. That's going to cost money. And instead of doing all of these services I just described, I'm going to put them back on the streets high. And that terrifies me because we've been so successful. We've cracked that enough. Way back when all the mental health hospitals, they got shut down. They all got shut down. It became the sheriff's burden then. And we're okay with that. You know what? We'll crack that nut. We're going to do it right, and we did it right. But don't take it away from me now when we're finally successful in what we're doing. So the other part of this stuff I'm going to brief on, I'm trying not to be too long, but this is important stuff, is this shall issue citation for B and C misdemeanors. Is there a manila envelope, around there somewhere? Yeah, this. So, when you say shall issue a citation for B and C misdemeanor, I'm going to use my most common one.
So, a few things. Let me start off with this. As part of the $62 or $63 million it's going to cost DuPage County over the next several years, $1 million a year in cash bail money goes to victims to pay them for restitution. And there is no replacement for that money. So that unfortunately, once again, the victims of crime in this state and in this county are going to suffer because of that. The biggest impact we're going to see is violent criminals are going to be released instead of being held to trial. And there's no way around that, and there's no denying it, because it's written into the law. And we get called fearmongers for talking about this, but the reality is 100 out of 102 state's attorneys are opposed to this law. 100 out of 102, and out of that 100, there's 77 Republicans and 23 Democrats. Bipartisan opposition to this law, because we care about public safety. What New York did when they passed their law a few years ago is this: they took discretion away from judges in most criminal cases. And they told judges the only way you can detain people is if they're a flight risk. They can no longer detain if they are a risk to the public, a risk to the community, a risk to commit further acts of violence when they're out. And this is something that the law allows judges to do right now. We get high bonds, we get $1 million, $2 million, $3 million bonds in this county because judges find that defendants are a danger to the community. There was an op-ed in the Tribune, February 2020, written by the former Attorney General of New Jersey and a former federal and state prosecutor in New Jersey. And they said, Illinois, we know you're contemplating eliminating cash bail. Don't do what New York did. It's been a disaster. Do what we did in New Jersey. New Jersey eliminated cash bail in 2017. New Jersey gives judges discretion in every single criminal case to detain someone. If they're a threat to the community, if they're a threat to the public, if they're a threat.
You know what? The impact that the Safety Act is going to have on the judiciary and the bench is going to have a significant impact, and it's going to have an impact that I don't even think we're going to be able to appreciate, but for years to come. I'm going to explain things as to how things are now and how things are going to change January 1st. Currently, we have a bond court or bond call, and when a defendant is brought to bond court, the state attorney comes and they are able to proffer information before the judge. Proffer is just a way of, they get to tell the judge about the facts and circumstances of the case, the defendant's criminal history, his or her failure to appear in court, and they get to do this by making a representation based upon the information that they have. This generally takes, depending on the severity of the crime, 5 minutes to 15 minutes that will go and have this hearing on each particular defendant. And mind you, on a particular weekend, it could have 30 arrests, and on any given day, it could be anywhere from 15 to 30 cases. With the Safety Act, these hearings are going to be taking several hours to even longer. So we're talking about a strain on resources and a strain on our ability to be able to hear other kind of cases and other cases that are before us. But it's also in what is the quantum of proof that is going to be put before us. Bob Berlin discussed this and talked about it briefly, and I'm just going to talk about it again, is this standard of clear and convincing evidence. We all know that the highest burden in all law is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But just below it is clear and convincing evidence. That's the standard that we're going to be dealing with as judges. That's a really high burden that the state's going to have to carry in order to try to detain someone. So how are they going to do this? What's this evidence or proof that they're going to bring before us? Now, they have the ability to proffer, they have the ability to tell us these things, but they also may, depending on the seriousness of the case, want to bring forth witnesses to do this. Again, extending that length of that type of case. But they may want to be bringing these witnesses before us. And also, the defense has the ability to petition the court to have victims of crime present in court mere hours after an offense has occurred, to be brought before the judge, to be cross-examined and asked about the case. That's victims of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, that they had a hard enough time doing this, and now have to be brought before a judge to be able to keep these people incarcerated. That's what could happen. And the defense can petition to have these victims present. I see a lot of you shaking your head. That's what we're up against. And that's what the Safety Act provides. So this is the issue when it comes to clear and convincing evidence. What's that quantum of proof? What is going to be necessary to be able to detain these people? The other issue that was talked about is we don't have a lot of direction, because this is such a new law, about how we're supposed to conduct these hearings. So there's a lot that we're doing as the judiciary, trying to decide how we're going to have these hearings and how they're going to be conducted. It was talked about a little bit in the question is, that's why it's so important that we have experienced judges that are hearing these cases. Experience should be the watchword of the Safety Act, because we need judges that have experience in hearing bond call cases. Because a judge that has heard these types of cases before or had bond hearings before knows of the law that applies and how it should be applied to kind of pigeonhole it or to be able to fit it in with the parameters we're set with. The other thing that an experienced judge does is able to provide a record and make a record. And I'm not talking about music. I'm talking about a judge sets forth and explains on the record the rationale behind his or her decision. Why is that important? Because again, we've got that burden of proof, clear and convincing evidence, and we have this new law that is going to be ripe for people appealing these cases. We don't have a lot of precedent or stare decisis, so these individuals, if we decide to detain them, they're going to be appealing these cases at record numbers. That's another one of the things that is going to be happening. There's going to be a lot of appeals on these cases because we have no direction. There's no authority out there that tells us how we're supposed to do that. So you better have an experienced judge that knows how to set a record and be able to say for the record, this is the reasons why I'm doing this. This is the standard that they've met. This is why we're going to detain these people, because, you know, you can bet your bottom dollar that come January 1st, when and if we detain people, they're going to be appealing those cases immediately, because they're going to say, look, you didn't meet the standard. So you better have an experienced judge that knows how to do it. So those are the issues that are that we have to address with the judiciary. Thank you.
Require a referendum to accommodate.
Well, look, I think the referendum we all have is on November 8th. Because whoever you put in those positions is who's going to be making decisions about where we're going to prioritize what we do with our taxpayer money. So the powers of two. You know, the truth is that the current makeup of the board, and again, I'm trying to avoid being too political, but needless to say, 11 out of my 18 colleagues, when this topic came before the board, and we actually were debating the merits of the Safety Act, and we were actually trying to get Governor Pritzker to veto this bill and not sign into law. 11 individuals on that board voted to table the measure indefinitely, meaning they didn't want to vote on it. They didn't want to vote on it. Now, that shows you what they're going to do with the implementation of this law. And the truth is that even today, when we were having discussion about what the implementation of this law is going to do for DuPage, you heard crickets. There are people that know that this is a bad idea, but we need people on that board that have the courage to stand up and stand up for our viewpoints on this, because like you heard from every individual tonight, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents are united around their distaste for this bill and the agreement that it needs to be fixed. And again, I think if you want someone who's going to be bringing their fiduciary responsibility to that board, making sure that we give law enforcement and our state's attorney and our judges all the resources that they need to keep us safe, then you need to be very, very careful about who you vote for on November 8th. So, powers with you.
This next question is for Sheriff Mendrick. You mentioned that you're having so much success now with being able to retrain and divert a lot of these offenders even while they're being held on bail. What type of recidivism would you expect if these people are released without this type of support?
So here's my fear. We are making a person better. We're rehabilitating them, we're getting them off dope and alcohol, and this process is kind of what I would equate to an intervention. You know, you ever hear of an intervention where the family says, this is it, you're gonna get help this time? It's a lot like that. So instead of doing that, we're gonna let them go where they will most likely reuse drugs and alcohol, most likely reoffend. The percentages go up like another 55% that they're going to go back to their proclivities. And then they'll pick up more and more charges before they ever see a judge. Now when you got 4 or 5 of these on you, when you see a judge, you're gonna go to Statesville. You're never gonna get rehabilitated. So it's gonna wipe that out completely. That's my fear, is that they're taking a system that we've actually built into performing the function. National, when you get told nationally, our accreditation, our outside accreditation comes in, terrifies my staff for 5 days. When they finished, they said you get a clean 100% on every one of these new rehabilitators here. 100%, they said there was no other close second in our nation in what we're doing. Thank you. So it's just such a shame to see something that's working so well all of a sudden. We finally cracked the nut and actually get really traction in this mental health detox field, and then they're threatening to take it away, and it just terrifies me. You know, they could add verbiage, just, you know, could be remanded for drug detox and mental health services if a correctional facility has those. Would be nice to see that, but I can't get asked. Like I said, I was the one who asked, hey, can we talk about this before it ever got signed and motion, you know, table it indefinitely, and we weren't allowed to speak about it. So I got stifled for over a year. I could only talk privately about it on the county board floor. So there's been a large push to just stifle this issue, tag it as racist, say it's lies, you know, whatever pushes that football down the football field to November 8th. You know, just put the blinders on, you know, thumbs and ears, and hum real loud and pretend it's really not going to happen. I don't understand that. See, we're a profession of preparedness, and we look at, hey, we have to prepare for these things. And I'll tell you what, speaking of prepared, we're going to be a lot less prepared with less staff. I'm 30 positions down. I can't remember ever being that far down. Everybody's quitting. You know, COVID killed the academies for a year and a half, so that didn't help. I've heard of some agencies getting 1 applicant per testing process. We used to get 500. We're lucky to get 50, maybe 15 viables per testing process. No one wants to be the police. We're all leaving. And it's because of this, you know, there's going to be, we can't even face our accusers. They're going to have no anonymous complaints. So right now, if you want to complain about a cop, you got to write their name and at least say, this is me saying who's accusing the cop. Anonymous complaints, just a phone call. Cop did something, cop did something. Just make it up. We have to investigate it. We're going to have to have internal affairs staff. You're going to have cops that's going to appear to have been investigated 20 times when they've never been found guilty of anything, but it's going to look good in court for the defense attorneys and stuff. It's a mess, and it's demoralizing. The policemen, they're leaving. You're probably going to have within 3 years 20 to 25% less police officers on these, and the crime will spiral out of control. So there's not going to be anyone to deal with it. That's why private security. We're even looking at having a training course for citizens on our use of force continuum. The exact same course, but for citizens to teach you how to do the portions of our job that you're going to now be forced to, like trespass. If someone was in here just yelling or screaming or just being a jerk but not a threat to anybody, I can only write him a ticket. And this establishment has to pick it. Either you're going to hire security, you're going to have your own personnel come to remove them. And again, are you going to touch them? Are you going to have weapons like tasers and pepper spray? Are you going to have a gun? Because it won't be our job to remove the person from this place. That's libraries, that's Starbucks, that's bars and restaurants.
It used to be.
Well, it's going to be tough. So those are the main issues that I have.
I'm going to pick my practice as well as being a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor for 13 and a half years, and I also was a defense attorney. And I recall situations where I would represent someone on a minor possession, and there would be situations where I would tell the family, don't bond them out. Let them get clean. Let the person try to start to get the rehab that they need. As a judge, I've seen people, and you can see the twitching. They're aching to get out of jail. I sometimes will have a situation where I'll hold them till I can get them in a facility and get them the treatment that they need. I will tell you, this year alone, I probably had conservatively 10 overdose cases. So that those cases then get dismissed. It's called death suggested, cause abated. I've had at least 10 of those. I talked to a defense attorney. He said probably in the last 5 years, he's had 50 clients that have overdosed. When we have the Safety Act, when it's coming on January 1st, it's catch and release. They are going to get arrested, and as soon as they're arrested, they're going to be released back on the street. Do you think that person is not going to go and try to go and get drugs again? You're fooling yourself. And then you can see it. I deal with it weekly. I have people come in and you can tell they are going for drugs, and the best thing I can do for them is to just say, hey, take a breath. Let's get you some treatment. Let's get you in a facility. Let's try to fix the problem.
Thank you, Judge.
Look, I mean, the law applies to everybody. You know, it applies to them as well. They're still in charge whether they're here legally or not. They have to comply with conditions of the law, and they'll be prosecuted like anybody else. We have a number of cases I know where we're prosecuting undocumented immigrants, people here illegally. If they go to prison, they go to prison. When they get out, they'll be deported. That's just how it works. But anyone that comes into the country is expected to follow the law like everybody else is. It's one law, it applies equally to everyone.
Judge Reedy, a question for you, and this one might be a little intense, but relative to sexual crimes and having heard of the new standards that will have to be proven to keep these people on bond, how does that work with the delay with rape kits and things like that, and the requisite evidence in those matters?
That's a really good question there, and we talked about these time frames and that sort of thing. I think that there's going to be these suggestions, and again, as a judge, I can't tell you how I'm going to rule on these things, and nor should a judge tell you that. We're going to have this ability to have this proffer, and again, it's going to be based back on that experience, because that judge had the experience to hear these type of things. For instance, if we were dealing with a sexual abuse against a child, does the judge understand that the evidence is presented through what's a VSI or a victim-sensitive interview? That when that is proffered to the judge and then it's explained that that's what was done, and other corroborative evidence that is brought before the judge, that the judge can say, hey, look, I find that this is corroborative at this point, and the prosecution can make the proffer that we have evidence out there waiting to be examined. Does the judge then take those things into consideration? Does the judge have the experience to say, look, I know that this type of case, and I'm going to make the requisite findings? As it relates to the time frame, there are things that do allow for extensions there, and again, that's a kind of a touch and go situation as to right now that what is in place. If there is a good faith basis and the prosecutors have made good faith efforts to get the DNA, you can extend the period of time before which you have the trial, so that 90-day period can get extended in certain circumstances. Again, there has to be a showing that they have done the right things to be able to get that extended.
That's why it's so important, because of the time frame. When a detention hearing has to be immediately held under the Safety Act. And immediately in DuPage County, where we have court every day, means the next day. And we only get one bite at the apple. The law says we can only file one petition for detention. So I can see there will be many cases where I'm going to be making that call to the sheriff saying, hey, can we get Rush DNA? And it's overtime for his people to come in and work it. But we are very fortunate to have our own crime lab, and that's why it's important that we have the right people on the county board, and Greg Hart is our county board chairman, to make sure that that lab gets the appropriate funding so that we can keep it.
Given there's a small but possible chance of reforming the Safety Act prior to January 1st, if there were one or two elements to be changed immediately that actually stood a snowball's chance to actually get through this democratic process we have, what would they be?
Well, look, I have participated in a number of calls with some of the legislators, and Peter Durkin is aware of this. The hopes of passing something by January 1st, it's unlikely, because they need a super majority of votes until we get to January. So if things had to be fixed, it's really, there's a number of big problems. One of them is the Class B and C citation versus arrest. It's a huge issue for the sheriff, for all police departments, and for the public. And the second thing is, like I talked about earlier, it's discretion. It's giving judges discretion to set, well, in this case it won't be bond, but to detain people. who are a danger to the community. And the Supreme Court has said, I'll finish with this, the Supreme Court has said everyone has a right to a bond. But the Supreme Court has also said that that right to a bond needs to be balanced against the right of the public to be safe. And that's critical, to put that decision where it belongs, which is in the hand of experienced judges who can make the appropriate determination and keep our community safe.
I really shouldn't do this, but I'm going to say something and tell you something that is going to probably make all your heads spin, and you're going to be like, well, we can talk about this for another 45 minutes. But the one thing that we are concerned with as judges is, remember we talked about it, and Steve Berlin talked about this, about what the quantum of proof that's necessary to detain people on this willful intent to evade prosecution. What happens if we have this person that is now no longer detained, they have been coming to court, but then they don't come to court? What happens then? Do we issue a warrant? Because we don't have cash bond anymore. Do we issue a rule to show cause? It's a civil, and we have to have service on that. It creates another huge issue or a huge problem, because I can tell you, I am in a courtroom every single week, and I have probably one failure to appear every day in a felony courtroom. At the misdemeanor level, people fail to appear all the time. So how do we handle that? So, since doing that.
I agree with everything that was mentioned in terms of fixes, and I think there's a lot from a policy standpoint that we can fix about this law. One thing I'd like to see, beyond what changes would be made to the legislation, is the process with which it was actually created in the first place. Law enforcement did not have a seat at the table when this law was created and passed. They did not. We need to make sure that the profession most impacted by this law has a seat at the table. And that's what we need to make sure of.
Well, for me, it's pretty easy to say what disturbs me the most. As sheriff, I put up my hand, I swore an oath. I've done this job for 26 years. And this is why everyone's retiring, is that we don't want to force society to do our job for us. We don't want, because and here's a scary thing, whether people are joking or not, a lot of times I hear, if someone's in my backyard, I'll shoot them. And that's terrifying to a sheriff, okay? That people are going to start discharging weapons in backyards and hit Johnny and Susie next door and all that kind of stuff. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But it's creating a divide where people are going to have so much less tolerance, because now they're going to say, well, if the cops aren't going to do it, then I'm going to do it for them. And we're going to have big trouble. We expect 80% of these to convert into physicality, where we're going to return for some type of physicality or violence. That is terrifying as a sheriff who was sworn to protect everybody in this county, in this society, and done it for 26 years, to be told now I'll be sued if I touch the person, if I try to do the job. And no, when the person back there, if there's someone sleeping right here during our event, that is a ticket. And these poor people here are going to have to cough up an employee to take care of it. Hopefully that person's trained. Hopefully have good video cameras to capture whatever happens. Or do you go against your FY23 budget and do headcount for security? I mean, these are the options everyone are going to have to do. What will you do to get somebody who is sleeping in your garage because you left it open and it's warm? See, that's what people don't realize. They're thinking, oh, you're saying this can't end, and what if they break it? No, you don't understand. You can have criminal, and then you can have what the police kind of call quasi-criminal, where they're not looking to harm anybody. They're a human organism. They're cold. This all happens on January 1st at the crack of midnight on New Year's Eve. What could possibly go wrong? So, yeah, when you put something together with so many force multipliers of probability of conflict, you're going to have conflict. But again, what breaks my heart is having to see my sworn job be taken away in part and parcel and forced onto a community who does not know the continuum of force, the 1+ theory, how to properly remove somebody for these crimes. So that's what breaks my heart. We're going to do everything we can to prevent that, but thank you for coming today.